Hi, my name's Roger and I'm the pastor of Dorchester Community Church. And of course, as a pastor of a church, you're somebody that's looked to quite rightly as being someone who ought to be able to bring a right word for a right occasion, maybe to speak words of calm into a difficult situation, or maybe to encourage a quiet sense of faith and trust in God during a particularly turbulent or difficult period. And that's all quite right and understandable, and there's times where I dare say that I'm able to do that. But if I'm honest, really honest, there are times when I find that pretty tough. Life is stressful, and like anybody else, I have my own moments where I get pretty stressed as well. It may well be something that I'm preparing for, or a talk that I've got to give, or more usually, as is often the case, a deadline that I've got to meet, and there is that sense of stress that's going on internally or that can bubble out in different ways. You may well be able to identify with that kind of time yourself. So this theme today that we're looking at, I'm so stressed, get me out of here, is in one sense as relevant for me as it is for anybody else. And if I'm brutally honest, my preference would have been for somebody else to speak to this subject today as opposed to me. You know, throughout this COVID season, that sense of stress has proven itself pretty real, isn't it? You may well have felt pretty stressed because of not being able to get out and see friends and family, or maybe you've been at the supermarket and felt quite stressed because some people are not respecting that sense of 2-meter social distancing. Or maybe there's your work situation. For some, there's maybe too much work. For others, not enough work, or maybe not even any work at all. The common denominator in both extremes is stress. It's a very real issue. What would God want to say to the likes of you and me in that context? That's what we're going to be thinking through today. I'm so stressed, get me out of here. Welcome to Dorchester Community Church. Well, you've had my confession, haven't you, already? Stress is an uncomfortable subject, that would be true. But it's also even more uncomfortable to feel. Each of us probably know that. This is one definition that I came across. Stress is a state of difficulty, pressure or strain. It's a mental, emotional and internal reaction to pressure. Stress is an intrusion, isn't it, to our living in peace. Now, you would have come across some of the major causes for serious stress. Things like the death of a loved one, or divorce, the loss of a job, or having to move at home, major illness. For teenagers, it's slightly different, but they've also got some top stresses. Pressures from school, exam, pressures from friends, pressures to conform, the whole sex question for them, fear of failing, lack of sleep. Well, all of those are quite major, significant stresses. But maybe at a smaller level, you know, each of us encounter different stresses every single day, don't we? I was quite intrigued by a survey that was conducted by Direct Line. And they spoke to 2,025 adults in the UK about what stressed them out most. Listen to some of these things and see if you can identify with any of these. 25% said that forgetting their bank card when paying for an item was stressful. Well, immediately I could feel my own stress levels increase, because it wasn't that long ago that I was there having filled up the car with petrol and went to go to pay, no bank card because it was in my other pair of trousers. 26% mentioned about dealing with a machine-operated customer service. How frustrating is that? Press 1 for this, press 2 for that, press 3 for that. And when you've gone through all that rigmarole, very often you find yourself back at square one. You think, I want to talk to a real person. Discovering you're out of toilet roll whilst on the loo. 30% of people mentioned that. I remember one occasion that happened to me when I was living in digs in Cotswold Road in Southampton near the hospital. Let's not go there. Or then there was 31% that mentioned about the printer not working when you need to print something. That's happened to me when I was due to be speaking here at church several times on a Sunday morning. Go to print my notes, no notes. Stress levels all of a sudden. How am I going to cope without my notes? 32% mentioned about there being nowhere to park. I know a member of the church that parked eventually in Lyme Regis quite recently, but don't tell anyone. They overstayed in their parking spot for 2 hours. They were lucky on this occasion they didn't get a ticket. Quite recently as well, wasn't it? That person knows who they are. 33% cited about losing an important paper or document. How stressful is that? 35% mentioned about being stuck in traffic and when you're already late. Why do those tractors seem to then veer out and come across you and pull in front of you out of nowhere? 37% mentioned the whole thing of losing your keys. How many times has that happened to you? And 46%, top of the list, mentioned about what made them more stressful than anything else was lack of sleep. I confess that makes me feel pretty guilty. You know, I'm just stressed even revisiting some of those items on that list, and I dare say you can actually connect with that as well. Well, that's life, isn't it? Well, is that right that we just then think that that's all there is, and we just satisfy ourselves by saying, well, that's life? That didn't ought to be good enough, did it? Not for me as a Christian. Surely God is big enough and powerful enough to be able to give me that which I need to be able to cope in a very different way to other people with all those different situations and stresses that come our way, that ought to make a difference so that people can see that difference in me. Well, that's the theory anyway. While you begin to ponder that, and I maybe calm down just a fraction, here's something for you to enjoy and appreciate. And then Laura is going to be sharing with the children. And then we're going to be able to see something that maybe is quite stressful for one of her children. See how they get on and what happens as a result. And maybe then discover from Laura what we ought to be able to do about it. But in the meantime, see if you can recognise this MJ classic.
We played on the bottle shakers. We played on the head racks. We played on the bass drum of destruction. Now, let's introduce you to something brand new. The double bottle.
kids, my name is Laura and I help run the Community Kids group when we're at church. Now, seeing as Roger's been talking about being in the jungle, we have got a little game for Rupert when he gets in here. His job is to find as many little monkeys like this that he can find. They're going to be in some unusual places. I wonder how many he can find. Right, Rupert, we've got a game for you. You've got to see how many little monkeys you can find in these pots that we're going to give you. How do you feel at the moment?
Terrified.
Terrified? Ooh. Right, Francis has got something for you. I'm going to give that to him and see if you can find a little monkey or more in there.
Whoa, what is that? Ugh.
Show everyone what it is, Francis. On the piece of paper. Down a bit.
That's what it is.
Yeah. You found a monkey?
You can't. That's I know what this is.
Yeah.
That's cabbage.
Yeah. That right?
It is. You can't find a monkey. I can see one. What is this? I can see two. What's this? I'm not telling you.
No, we're not telling you.
You need to try and find out. You'll find out when you've done it. Where's it gone? Where's a monkey? I want to find a monkey. Oh, I found one. Yep.
Well done. And there should be another one in there. Put it on the table then. How do you feel, Rupert? How do you feel?
Anxious. Oh, you're gonna need to... Oh, my sleeves are open.
Are you sure everyone what's in this one?
Oh, what is that? Ah, yuck. What is that? Ah, yuck. What is that? I know what it is. It's soap. No, it's not soap. Try and find a monkey. Oh, here's one. Oh,
Yay!
Yeah.
Put it on the table.
Yeah. Oh. There you go.
Show everyone what it is.
Oh my goodness, what's that? What is this? What's that? It's not no. I recognise this. What is it? It's some sort of food, isn't it? Yeah. I'm going to taste it. What does it taste like? You can't taste it. I can. What is it? I'm not telling you.
No, we'll tell you after. Can you find a monkey?
Find a monkey. Try and find a monkey. Is this one? Let me say.
Is that one?
No. There's loads of them in here. There's definitely a monkey in here. Is it? Come on. Try and find a monkey. Did we actually not put a monkey in there? I found one. Is that a monkey? Yeah, that is a monkey.
Well done.
What is it?
So this is how we ended up with a right old mess. Now Rupert used the words terrified and anxious to describe how he was feeling before he did the unknown. And sometimes we might feel terrified and anxious about things, but we should always remember that God is with us and we need to pray to him and he will make us feel much better and be able to get through those situations that make us feel terrified and anxious. Hope to see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Now, stress is something, as we know, that is very, very real, that can negatively affect millions of people's lives, including the likes of yours and mine. Now, if I was to invite you to think of what kind of stress you're going under right now, I dare say it wouldn't take too long for something to pop to the forefront of your mind, or maybe for some things to pop to the forefront of your mind. It may well, of course, be that you're feeling quite stressed to even think about those things. What I want to invite you to do, though, is to just put those things on hold, to press the pause button and place those things to one side whilst we worship God in song together, because he's going to become our focus. And this is some of the words that we're going to be singing in our song together. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Sing your heart out as we worship God together in song now.
Who am I that the highest King would welcome me? I was lost, but he brought me in. Oh, his love for me. Oh, his love for me. Who the Son sets free, always free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Free at last he has ransomed me, or his grace runs deep. While I wasn't safe to sing, Jesus died for me. Yes, he died for me. Who the Son sets free, always free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. I am chosen, not forsaken. I am who you say I am. You are for me, not against me. I am who you say I am. Oh, I am who you say I am. Who the Son sets free, always free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house there's a place for me. I'm a child of God, yes I am.
Nice cup of coffee. Well, remember, before we sang, I encouraged you to think about an area of your own life where you may well feel stressed or be prone to stress. Maybe give yourself a stress audit, we may well want to call it that. We know that anger and frustration are central to there being a stress build-up. The body can also be affected by stress. Change is often the pressure point, isn't it? So with COVID situation, meaning that for many people, all the changes that are going on, it's no surprise that many people are feeling even more stressed than usual. It's especially true, of course, in and around people's job situations, isn't it? No work for some, even a loss of job for others, whereas other people, well, they've just got too much work and they're struggling to cope. That sense of stress that's very real for them. One manager put it like this. He said, I don't mind that my people are working such long hours because I've been told that I've got to reduce my headcount. Long hours means that some can't take it anymore and they resign, which is a lot cheaper than making them redundant. Pretty curt words. Many more, of course, are employed these days on short-term contracts, and that can create its own sense of stress in terms of lack of job security. There's so much uncertainty around, isn't there? In the short term, those changes gear us up for increased activity, don't they? But in the long term, stress can do us quite a degree of damage. Headaches, back pain, all sorts of things. Stomach pain, skin irritations, increased risk of heart disease, sleep disturbance, tiredness, hormonal disturbance, amongst other things. Sometimes our reactions to stress damage us, of course, even further. Smoking, drinking too much alcohol or caffeine, poor nutrition. It's a real kind of cheering up message, isn't it, so far? But it's not just our bodies that suffer. We know that relationships suffer as well. We all know that. This is factual stuff. It's not made up or hyped up stuff. This is the world that we live in. It is stressful, and we can get stressed, let's be honest. But the key thing for us is what God might say to us in the midst of this. Now, last week, we were actually thinking about what the Bible states, in that He is not far from each one of us, from Acts chapter 17. But how does that translate? Well, I caught up with one of our members, Joy, who shared her experience of when her father died. Now, understandably, that was at a very stressful time, and yet it was into that sense of stress that Joy had a very precious experience of the reality of God. Now, whilst you're watching this is an interview we did via Zoom. Joy lives way out in the sticks, so every now and then the picture will be frozen a little bit, but don't worry, it doesn't affect the audio at all. Listen and catch hold of the reality of Joy's words in her sense of knowing God in the middle of her own stress. Hi Joy, so how are you guys doing?
Yeah, no, we're absolutely great, thank you. Could do with some sunshine because it's raining today, but we're fine, thanks.
Fantastic. I know you've been managed to get loads done in the garden, but maybe today's not the day for that. Joy,
No.
we were sort of sharing this morning on Cafe Church about knowing how God can be near us. He's not far from each one of us. And different people were sharing their different stories, different experiences. Remind us of one of those occasions that was very real for you.
Okay, so this was back in 2008. My dad at the time was, or had been living on Hayling Island, and I was in Kent. And he'd had to come and stay with us in Kent because he'd lost his wife, who was also my auntie, and Dad had pneumonia. So he came back to stay with us in the November, very poorly, but he was, as far as I was concerned, he was okay. And he went into hospital, came out just before Christmas, so we had Christmas together. And he had an appointment at the hospital on the Monday. And on the Friday beforehand, he sat me down, gave me a little talk and said he was ready to go. He had nothing left to wait for. He'd had his time. He knew where he was going. He had no doubt that he knew where he was going. And I found out later that he'd also phoned my sister, who lives in Wales, and pretty much said the same things to her. My brother came in the evening, and together we put Dad to bed and tucked him in. And he just snuggled down. And in the morning, I found that he'd actually died during the night, which was obviously very, very hard for me.
Yeah.
Really, really hard. Don't know quite how I got through that first day, but I did. But then God just picked me up and wrapped me up and looked after me, and he gave me that peace which passes all understanding. You've probably heard people talk about it, but I don't know how many people have actually experienced it. But from that time on, I really did have that peace, and I have no explanation for it other than it's what God gave me. Other people noticed it and said, how can you look so fine, and how can you be, so calm about all this? And I just said, well, it's the peace that passes all understanding.
Yeah.
And it just, I've never looked back on that time with anything but fondness, really, now.
That's fantastic. At a time that maybe for others would have been one of the most difficult times, or maybe for some even a way that they might say, well, how can there be a God? Actually, for you, his reality was cemented all the more.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Now we were sharing that at Cafe Church, Joy. I know you tend to link in with that most weeks. What's some of the positives about Cafe Church for you, and what would you say for maybe anybody that's not yet thought about doing that, or a bit wary or anxious about that?
Well, it's really, really easy to get into Cafe Church. Really easy to use Zoom. Just a couple of clicks on your laptop. And for me, I just find it's really helping me to feel connected with the church, being so far out where we are. We can't pop round and have a chat over a garden fence or at the end of a drive with somebody.
Yeah.
And it's just a really lovely way just to keep seeing people and keep talking to people and keep reading the word together and just doing church. And I love it.
Fantastic. Bless you. Okay, all the best to you and all the best to Mervyn too.
Thanks, Roger.
All right,
okay.
Take care, Joy. Bye.
Bye.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Joy, for being willing to share what must have been a very difficult situation. You know, one church leader called Paul shared with God about a stress that he had. He kept on asking God to take it away, and sometimes that's what we would want, isn't it, for that stress to just disappear. The answer he got may would have at first seemed somewhat unhelpful, but evidently it was in fact all he needed at that time. God simply told him, "My grace is sufficient for you." You can see that in 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 9. Joy's experience highlights that this grace isn't some airy-fairy thing, because it was that something that indeed pulled her through and was indeed a reality that she couldn't deny. I love that particular phrase that she came out with, which was totally off the cuff and unrehearsed. She said these words: "God picked me up and wrapped me up and looked after me and gave me that peace that passes all understanding." I've no other explanation for it other than it's what God gave me. Nobody can deny the reality of that. God coming in to make such a difference in a situation that was naturally very, very stressful. Now we've got 2 readings for you today that I hope will help. The first is for everyone, and it's the words of Jesus himself issuing an invitation. The second, which we'll see a little bit later, is for those in the church. But first, this is what Jesus says to everyone. So that must include you.
Please turn with me in your Bibles to Matthew chapter 11. And we're going to start to read at verse 25. At that time Jesus said, "I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and learned and revealed them to little children. Yes, Father, for this was your good pleasure. All things have been committed to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light."
It's great, isn't it? Jesus regularly invited people to come to him to meet their needs. Jesus did not say, "Come to church to find rest," great though that is, when we're allowed to use the building. So in one sense, our not having a building right now, although inconvenient, didn't ought to mean that we can't have our needs met. We're to come primarily, firstly, to the person of Jesus in faith. And that could be right where we are, right where you are, right now, today, as you watch this. This Jesus may well not walk this earth, but we believe he's very much alive by his Spirit. Christianity begins with meeting Jesus personally. It's that faith experience that can become real the moment we take that initial step towards him. His invitation to come as you are right now whatever the stress, whatever the test, or whatever the mess that's real, come to me, he says, and I will give you rest. One of his first followers, a guy by the name of Peter, often a bull in the china shop type character, said these words somewhat later in 1 Peter chapter 5 verses 6 and 7. He encouraged people saying, humble yourselves therefore under God's mighty hand, that he might lift you up in due time. Cast all your anxiety upon him, for he cares for you. Take his yoke. Now what's all that about? Well, yoke is nothing in this sense to do with eggs. No, not at all. The meaning of a yoke is it's a type of harness that connects a pair of oxen. This is a true story. One day a man went to see a farmer who was ploughing his field with a team of oxen. The man noticed that one of the animals was bigger than the other. The farmer said that the big animal was an older animal and was well trained, and that the smaller one was a young animal and so was new, therefore, to the yoke. Well, why put them together? The man asked. Well, the farmer answered, that older ox knows his way around the field. The reason I put the younger one with him is so the more knowledgeable ox could teach him how to plough. If I never put them together, then the younger one would never learn. By himself, the younger ox, well, he'd just put himself to death, but together he learns to cooperate with and rest in the strength of the older ox. That was quite key. Take hold of those words, to rest in the strength of the older. Well, we spoke to Professor Terence of Poundbury Theological Seminary, and he enlightened us further.
Yes, well, the word yoke is used about 6 times, I think it is, in the New Testament. But there are 2 different meanings, which is important to clarify, obviously, the difference between the 2 of them. One is the yoke of following man's rules and religion, so to speak. This is not the my yoke that Jesus speaks of, which is much more to do with relationship, which is what we have here. His yoke is easy compared to man-made religious yokes, if you like. So one might imagine if Jesus were to have a sign outside of his own carpenter shop, for example, it may well read, "My yokes fit well." Rather like that. A Bible scholar friend of mine, whose transcript I've been proofreading recently, J.H. Howitt, summarised it rather succinctly, I felt. He said the fatal mistake for the believer is to seek to bear one's load in a single collar. God never intended us to carry our burdens alone, you see. Jesus therefore deals only in yokes. A yoke is a neck harness for two. And the Lord himself pleads to be one of the 2. I thought that was most insightful.
Thank you, Professor. That's very helpful. Am I right in thinking that you've also just finished writing a book yourself?
Yes, that's right, David. Here it is. I'm giving away a free copy of my book to Sylvia Cox. Sylvia Cox, who's shown enormous appreciation of my work over recent times, which I'm incredibly grateful for. The book itself is called "Those We Refuse to Recognise," and if you're listening, Sylvia, I do hope you also like the hedgehog house that dear boy Richard made for you. But have a good read of the book. I'm sure you'll find it most enlightening, Sylvia. Yes, so the Lord bless you.
That's fantastic. Thanks ever so much to Professor Terence there, and I hope, Sylvia, that you enjoy his book and obviously enjoy the hedgehog house as well, that I gather was being secretly made for you, and at least now you're able to get your motorbike back into the garage. Back now to our passage and Jesus' invitation. He's already encouraged us to come to him, but he also is encouraging us to learn from him. Listen to his words, spend time with him, be still and know that he is God. It's up to me, of course, whether or not I choose to do that, like it's up to you whether or not you choose to do that. Jesus seeks to lead us, and he's never going to lead us into stress, because he's the Prince of Peace. He's not the Prince of Stress, is he? Common sense tells us that God's not going to stress us out or lead us to do more than we can in fact do. Yet often we seem to take on board more than we actually should. Try to beware of your mouth saying yes when your head and your heart are clearly screaming out no. It is no one but our fault, my fault, if we say yes to please people, when God and his word clearly tells us to find out what pleases the Lord. You can read that yourself in Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 10. Whilst you're thinking about that, pondering about that, we're going to worship God together in song. It's a great song and it's called Oceans.
Where feet may fail, and there I find you in the mystery, in oceans deep, my faith will stand, and I will call upon your name, and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace, for I am yours, you are mine. Abounds in deepest waters, your sovereign hand will be my guide. Where feet may fail and fear surrounds me, you've never failed and you won't stop now. I will call upon your name and keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace, for I am yours, you are mine. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters, wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander. My faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters, wherever you would call me. feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander. My faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. Keep my eyes above the waves. When oceans rise, my soul will rest in your embrace. For I am yours, you are mine.
Okay, it's now time for our celebration tin. Da, da, da. Okay, let's see what celebrations we've got here today. Nearly getting a bit stressed out there with my glasses. I can't afford to do that when we're looking at a subject of stress, can we? Okay, well, what are we going to celebrate then today? Well, we could maybe mention about the England cricket team winning the Test match series against the West Indies, but maybe not have too much of a cricketing indulgence for the second week running. So best not go there, although it was nonetheless a really, really good win. Well, you've also got on your screen some pictures of some handmade jewellery, not by me, I have to say, but by Lisa Knight. Now, Lisa started this up as a hobby, and now she's kind of getting into maybe developing her own business. She doesn't know that I'm going to show these pictures, but I asked her the sorts of stuff that she made. Maybe she thought I was after some earrings, who knows. So you'll see some of what Lisa has been making on the screen now. Aren't they fantastic? And whilst we think about Lisa and where she lives out at Portersham, well, here's Portersham's very own Johnny Depp, who had a lovely lunch there out courtesy of Lisa. And now here is another of our members, the couple who's seeking to move abroad to Abu Dhabi. Here's the latest update from Bruce and V.
Hi everybody, we just thought we'd record a quick message to let you know what we're up to. So we've got our dates finally. We're going sometime between the 6th and the 8th to Abu Dhabi, and that's our news. We're all excited about that. And
Gemma is heading to Serbia on Wednesday, and then she will be heading off to the States around the 21st of August.
So then you'll be rid of all of us. Bye!
Brilliant. Be good to keep in touch with them both, wouldn't it? Now here's a picture of a young lady, Claire, and her daughter Lily May, and their latest addition to the family. So a chocolate on the way to, not the kitten, I hasten to add, who's called Tiggy by all accounts, but maybe Lily May, this is something for you. When it gets to birthdays, well, here's a happy birthday to Mervyn Manuel. It's Mervyn's birthday on Tuesday, so Mervyn, a happy birthday indeed for you. No idea how we're going to get this to you. We'll kind of pretend to throw it to you. Maybe you can pick it up, or your mum can scoop it up from us somewhere. Now, here's another short video clip. This is my son, a particular trick that he was practicing recently on his skateboard. Take a look. Now, in terms of the trick that he was doing, here is my question for you. What was so special about that trick that Steve performed? And you'll get the answer at the end of this broadcast. There we go, that's the end of the celebrations for another week. Make sure if you've got a celebration that you want us to share in, let us know by Tuesday, please. Back to our message and where we were at. Well, Jesus seemed to be always busy, didn't he, if you read the Gospels, and yet he never seemed to be stressed. He didn't even have a car, let alone a mobile phone. Some of you, of course, may well think, well, that's exactly why he wasn't stressed. So in his beckoning us to come to him for rest, what was it that we can learn from him that might help us in terms of our own becoming less stressed, or maybe not even being stressed at all? Here's 3 very quick, very brief, practical things that Jesus did to make life more manageable. Firstly, organisation. He set clear goals. Manageable goals too. We're often so unrealistic, aren't we, in terms of the expectations of ourselves or maybe of others. You're not Superman, you're not Superwoman. I know, I'm certainly neither of those. We can't do everything, can we? There's only so much that we can do. We need to be maybe a little bit kinder to ourselves. And if you don't bend, you're going to break. And until that time, we each then risk that sense of becoming increasingly stressed. Well, as organisation, there's also delegation. Don't try to do everything yourself. Jesus drew a group of people around him, didn't he? In terms of the making of these broadcasts, there's different people that take part, different people that contribute, different people that piece it together. We need one another. If we try to do everything, it's just not going to work. And the only person that's going to be damaged is going to be the likes of you and me if we seek to do that. Relaxation is the other thing. Take time to enjoy your life as well. That sense of life in all its fullness that Jesus spoke about in John chapter 10. What do you do for you? Have you ever heard people who are going through a tough time say, you know, someday I'm going to look back on this and laugh? And whenever I hear that, I'm tempted to say, well, why wait? Why not do it right now? Laughter is good for us. Medical research would confirm this. There are chemical changes that take place in your brain whenever you laugh. Ha ha. When we get stressed, we start to take everything, everyone, including ourselves, maybe a little bit too seriously. A sense of humour is a great anti-stress skill. It's also something that has been created, let's not forget, by God himself. And that whole thing of the capacity to laugh is one of the reasons we put some of those silly little clips in. As well as breaking up the narrative and the serious, we're being helped to relax, to laugh, to let go, to realise that life can be positive, even amusing at times. And boy, don't we need that. So here's something that'll hopefully put a little smile on your face. Okay, I dare say you had a little bit of a groan when those jokes came up on the screen, but it's good to laugh, isn't it? Now then, back to something a little bit more serious. Now, one of our members is a psychiatrist. So, in terms of this topic of stress, what better person to ask than somebody who maybe has their own sense of stress, but who certainly deals with many people during their working week who suffer with stress. What might she say to try and support and help them? Ali is a part of our worship team as well. She'll be singing later on in the broadcast for you. But also, she's very real about her own situation, and as being a Christian, here she shares something as to how it is for her dealing with stress as a believer. And who best to interview her and to ask her these questions than somebody who knows her best? This is the interviewing technique from her son, Fraser.
Just asked me to interview you for his I'm in lockdown and I'm stressed, get me out of here. It's part of the Sunday broadcast, so he wants me to ask you some questions.
Okay.
So, first question, what makes you most stressed at home? Just normal.
What makes me most stressed at home? Well, it's a bit of a silly thing really, but I get really stressed when people leave the door of the larder open. So we have our larder and it's supposed to stay cool, that's like kind of the point of it. But people keep leaving the door open, and that really winds me up, and I don't really quite understand why they can't just close it. I suppose another thing that would make me stress is when I want to have peace and quiet and my neighbour starts mowing his lawn, like just now when we're trying to do this interview.
So, second question, similar. What makes you most stressed at home in lockdown?
Okay, so lockdown has made things like nicer in a way because we've had more time at home together, but also more stressful. So I've been trying to work at home, mostly like in our bedroom. So I've been working and sleeping in the same place, which is not great. It's a bit stressful, and also you guys sometimes try and come in to see me or ask me questions, or as soon as I come out of the room you want to talk to me, which is lovely, but it's also quite difficult. And I think not being with one's colleagues and being able to chat stuff through casually with them is really difficult and stressful as well. The other thing that I've missed, I suppose, is the journey bit, where you sort of get to unwind on the journey home, and I think that's probably made everyone feel a bit more stressed as well.
So, third question, what kind of things have been stressing your patients and their families, and what do you tell them to do about it?
Okay, so yeah, my patients are under 18s as well, so they're all like young people living at home with their families, and I suppose they've had similar stresses to ours in terms of trying to do schoolwork at home without a teacher to help them talk through things, and a lot of them have found that really difficult. And also the loss of routine and the loss of contact with other people. So, I mean, we know that stress is really bad for our bodies. It has an impact on hormones that then give us high blood pressure and inflammation and other difficulties. But with patients, that would help would be things around routine, like good sleep, good exercise, good eating routine. Sure, on the other side of it, that they do things that they really enjoy, and to try and still find those things during lockdown.
So, how do you think being a Christian helps with thinking about stress?
It like impacts on all of your thinking, isn't it, in all areas of life. That Jesus comes alongside us and is like a continuous friend, so even in this kind of stressful situation of lockdown, we can still talk to him and have that relationship with him, which is really helpful. Not worrying, including Jesus talking about not worrying, and also about how we are not beings and we're not in control, and we need to rest on his strength. Those things have been really helpful, and also just enjoy, like including the natural creation, but also like you guys, like having fun with you boys and enjoying that.
Cool.
That was so helpful, wasn't it? So thank you, Ali, and thank you, Fraser, for those very serious questions. I think we've got an interviewer in the making. And Jonah, brilliant for that filming that you did behind the scenes there. So thank you so much indeed for that as well. Now here is another great quote that comes from Christianity Today website. Buffer the effects of stress by nurturing your emotional well-being. Improve yourself physically. Be a lifelong learner. Eat right. Get good sleep and rest. Take some slack time. And most importantly of all, take time out to sit alone with God. I remember somebody once saying to me that no such time was wasted time. And I've never forgotten that pearl of wisdom. We've probably heard the phrase, haven't we? The straw that broke the camel's back. But we've probably never really thought about what that means. There are loads of different phrases that we hear and that get said that I don't really tend to think about what they mean at all. Well, chronic stress is about carrying a load of issues. The straw that broke the camel's back was not just one straw, but a whole load of them piled up high, one by one by one, a collection of previous straws that we didn't really let go of. We mustn't let straws build up. The Bible tells us that through spending time with God, particularly through times of prayer, we can hand over these issues we face to Him and then get His perspective on things. Remember, there's no problem that is too big for God and His power, and there's no problem that is too small for Him to be concerned about. Now, earlier I mentioned that we had 2 Bible readings today. One that was for everyone, that invitation from the Lord Jesus Himself, but the second one that was specifically for the church. Now here's that second one now. We know it's for the church because it was written to a church at a place called Philippi. It was inspired by God's Holy Spirit. These are words, though, that are equally real for the church today. Sarah is going to read that to us right now.
This reading is from the book of Philippians, chapter 4, and we're going to start reading at verse 4. Rejoice in the Lord always. Again I will say, rejoice. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything, by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honourable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. What you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you.
Well, without unpacking all of these verses, they simply speak about our knowing our identity, knowing who we are, and then about our being grateful and knowing who we should live for. We need to live for an audience of one. Remembering to look out for things to thank God for is often a major way of taking the stress out of situations, because our focus is then elsewhere. Maybe you know the song, Count Your Many Blessings, name them one by one, and it will surprise you what the Lord has done. Some of you would have been saying the end of that line with me, no doubt. Then we need to think about the right things. Look at this amazing list once again in Philippians chapter 4. Everything else that we could possibly be stressed about, well, that's what we can maybe kind of group together as our requests, that we can then just bring those to God and then seek to leave them there with Him. That's the key thing. The result? Well, according to His word in that passage, and the peace of God which transcends all understanding will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Isn't that what we want? Isn't that what we want, not just for ourselves, but for those close to us, those that we love? Then we need to take careful note of what God's word says. Hold on to verse 9, because God's promise is that it will be the peace of God that will then be with you.
Jesus, the
Well done, a fantastic song by Ali. Thanks ever so much for bringing that to us in such non-stressed out mode, I have to say. Now remember that clip we showed you earlier of Stephen on his skateboard, and I was saying what was so special about that trick? I wonder if you worked it out. Take a look again, but this time this is in slow motion. Okay, well there you go. That was pretty clever, wasn't it? That's my boy for you. Time magazine noted in the 60s that an American Senate subcommittee debated time management, predicting that the advances in technology would radically change how many hours a week we would be working. Now they forecast, get this, that the average person would be working 22 hours a week within the next 20 years. Now don't laugh, because there's more to come. The great challenge, the experts said, would be figuring out what to do with all the excess time that we would have on our hands. Well, that made me laugh when I came across that, I have to say. But maybe it's because we have so much time that we're all so stressed. I think not. Rob Parsons from Care for the Family said these words in one of his books: "A slower day is not coming." And he's right. So what should we do? We've already made mention of that verse in the book of Ephesians that says that we ought to find out what pleases the Lord. He's the person that we're living for. He's the person that has a purpose and plan for our lives. The more we're in tune with that, inevitably the less stressed that we're going to be. Joyce Meyer said these words. She said, "I believe one of the major reasons why so many people are stressed and burned out is because they're going their own way instead of following God's plan. When we're obedient to His leading, we'll be able to accomplish what He gives us to do and to walk in peace." Now, unless God has made a mistake, then He's created you and I with having just enough time to do that which we've been created to do. The challenge is not for us to think, "I'm so stressed, get me out of here," but rather to be honest with God, to say, "This is where I am right now. Help me step by step to get to where you want me to be and where I need to be." And maybe the final words that we can have ringing through our minds today can be something that would formulate part of a closing prayer that Ali has indeed sung to us. We can pray these words together. God, holy, there is no one like you. There is none beside you. Open my eyes in wonder. Show me who you are and fill me with your heart. Lead me in your love to those around me. I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation, and I will put my trust in you alone, and I will not be shaken. Let's trust ourselves to God to that end. I trust that you've enjoyed your time with us. Thank you so much for joining us. As ever, if you've got some questions or some comments about anything you've seen and heard, we'd love to hear from you. Otherwise, I hope from this moment on, and especially today, you live your life with maybe a little bit less stress as we each of us seek to keep more in step with the God who's created us to that end. God bless you all.
That's all, folks.